Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mrs. Helena Blavatsky. This is The Secret Doctrine. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people seem to find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the secret doctrine with the Theogony of the creative gods. To thoroughly comprehend the idea underlying every ancient cosmology necessitates the study, in a comparative analysis, of all the great religions of antiquity, as it is only by this method that the root idea will be made plain. Exact science, could the latter soar so high, while tracing the operations of nature to their ultimate and original sources, would call this idea the hierarchy of forces. The original, transcendental, and philosophical conception was one. But, as the systems began to reflect with every age more and more the idiosyncrasies of nations, and as the latter, after separating, settled into distinct groups, each evolving along its own national or tribal groove, the main idea gradually became veiled with the overgrowth of human fancy. While in some countries the forces, or rather the intelligent powers of nature, received divine honors they were hardly entitled to, in others, as now in Europe and the civilized lands, the very thought of any such force being endowed with intelligence seems absurd and proclaimed unscientific. Therefore, one finds relief in such statements as are found in the introduction to As God and the Gods, Tales and Traditions of Our Northern Ancestors by W.S.W. Anson. The author remarks on page 3, Although in Central Asia, or on the banks of the Indus, in the land of the pyramids, and in the Greek and Italian peninsulas, and even in the north, where the Celts, Teutons, and Slaves wandered, the religious conceptions of the people have taken different forms, yet their common origin is still perceptible. We point out this connection between the stories of the gods and the deep thought contained in them, and their importance, in order that the reader may see that it is not a magic world of erratic fancy which opens out before him, but that life and nature form the basis of the existence and action of these divinities. And though it is impossible for any occultist or student of Eastern esotericism to concur in the strange idea that the religious conceptions of the most famous nations of antiquity are connected with the beginnings of civilization amongst the Germanic races, he is yet glad to find such truths expressed as that. These fairy tales are not senseless stories written for the amusement of the idle. They embody the profound religion of our forefathers. Precisely so. Not only their religion, but likewise their history. For a myth, in Greek, mythos, means oral tradition, passed from mouth to mouth, from one generation to the other. And even in the modern etymology, the term stands for a fabulous statement, conveying some important truth. A tale of some extraordinary personage whose biography has become overgrown, owing to the veneration of successive generations, with rich popular fancy, but which is no wholesale fable. Like our ancestors, the primitive Aryans, we believe firmly in the personality and intelligence of more than one phenomenon-producing force in nature. As time rolled on, the archaic teaching grew dimmer, and those nations more or less lost sight of the highest and one principle of all things, and began to transfer the abstract attributes of the causeless cause to the caused effects, become, in their turn, causative. The creative powers of the universe, the great nations, out of their fear of profaning the idea, the smaller because they either fail to grasp it or lack the power of philosophic conception needed to preserve it in all its immaculate purity. But one and all, with the exception of the latest Arians, now become Europeans and Christians, show this veneration in their cosmogonies. As Thomas Taylor, footnote, see magazine for April of 1797. As Thomas Taylor, the most intuitional of all the translators of Greek fragments, shows, no nation has ever conceived the one principle as the immediate creator of the visible universe, for no sane man would credit a planner and architect with having built the edifice he admires with his own hands. On the testimony of Damascius, Periarchon, they referred to it as the unknown darkness. The Babylonians passed over this principle in silence. To that God, says Porphyry in Peri Approaches Amsucium, who is above all things, neither external speech ought to be addressed, nor that which is inward. Hesiod began his Theogony with, chaos of all things was the first produced. And there is another footnote. Et toi men prostita chaos genet, genito, being considered in antiquity as meaning was generated and not simply was. Chaos of all things was the first produced, thus allowing the inference that its cause or producer might be passed over in reverential silence. Homer, in his poems, ascends no higher than Night, whom he represents Zeus as reverencing. According to all the ancient theologists and to the doctrines of Pythagoras and Plato, Zeus, or the immediate artificer of the universe, is not the highest god, any more than Sir Christopher Wren, in his physical human aspect, is the mind in him which produced his great works of art. Homer, therefore, is not only silent with respect to the first principle, but likewise with respect to those two principles immediately posterior to the first, the ether and chaos of Orpheus and Hesiod, and the bound and infinity of Pythagoras and Plato. Footnote. It is the bound, confused with the infinite, that Kapila overwhelms with sarcasms in his disputations with the Brahmin yogis, who claim in their mystical visions to see the highest one. Proclus says of this highest principle that it is the unity of unities, and beyond the first deity, more ineffable than all silence, and more occult than all essence, concealed amidst the intelligible gods. To what was written by Thomas Taylor in 1797, namely, that the Jews appear to have ascended no higher than the immediate artificer of the universe, as Moses introduces a darkness on the face of the deep, without even insinuating that there was any cause of its existence. Footnote. C.T. Taylor's article in his monthly magazine quoted in The Platonist, edited by T.M. Johnson. Without even insinuating that there was any cause of its existence. One might add something more. Never had the Jews in their Bible a purely esoteric symbolical work, if that is confusing, see the Unconventional Bible Study, degraded so profoundly their metaphorical deity, as have the Christians, by accepting Jehovah as their one living, yet personal God. This first, or rather one, principle was called the circle of heaven, symbolized by the hierogram of a point within a circle, or equilateral triangle, the point being the Logos. Thus, in the Rig Veda, wherein Brahma is not even named, cosmogony is preluded with the Hiranyagahara, the golden egg, and Prajapati, Brahma, later on, from whom emanate all of the hierarchies of creators. The monad, or point, is the original, and is the unit from which follows the entire numeral system. This point is the first cause, but that from which it emanates, or of which, rather, it is the expression, the Logos, is passed over in silence. In its turn, the universal symbol, the point within the circle, was not yet the architect, but the cause of that architect, and the latter stood to it in precisely the same relation as the point itself stood to the circumference of the circle, which cannot be defined according to Hermes Trismegistus. Porphyry shows that the monad and the duad of Pythagoras are identical with Plato's infinite and finite. In Philebus, or what Plato calls the Apeiron and Paris, it is the latter only, the mother, which is substantial, the former being the cause of all unity and measure of all things. The duad, mulo prakriti, the veil, being thus shown to be mother of the Logos and at the same time his daughter. In example, the object of his perception, the produced producer, and the secondary cause of it. With Pythagoras, the monad returns in silence and darkness as soon as it has evolved the triad, from which emanate the remaining 7 numbers of the 10 numbers which are at the base of the manifested universe. In the Norse cosmogony, it is again the same. In the beginning was a great abyss, chaos. Neither day nor night existed. The abyss was Ginnungagap, the yawning gulf, without beginning, without end. All Father, the uncreated, the unseen, dwelt in the depth of the abyss, space, and willed, and what was willed came into being. See Asgard and the gods. As in the Hindu cosmogony, the evolution of the universe is divided into 2 acts, called in India the Prakriti and Padma creations, before the warm rays pouring from the home of brightness awake life in the great waters of space. The elements of the first creation come into view, and from them is formed the giant Ymir, also Orgulmir, primordial matter differentiated from chaos, literally seething clay. Then comes the cow, Adumla, the nourisher. Footnote. Vak, the melodious cow, who milks sustenance and water, and yields us nourishment and sustenance, as described in the Rig Veda. Adumala, the nourisher, from whom is born Buri, the producer, who, by Bestla, the daughter of the Frost giants, the sons of Ymir, had 3 sons, Odin, Willi, and We, or Spirit, Will, and Holiness. Compare the genesis of the primordial races in this work. This was when the darkness still reigned throughout space, when the Aces, the creative powers, Dayan Kohans, were not yet evolved, and the Yggdrasil, the tree of the universe of time and life, had not yet grown, and there was as yet no Valhalla, or Hall of Heroes. The Scandinavian legends of creation of our earth and world begin with time and human life. All that precedes it is for them darkness, wherein All-Father, the cause of all, dwells, as observed by the editor of Asgard and the Gods. Though these legends have in them the idea of the All-Father, the original cause of all, he is scarcely more than mentioned in the poems, not because, as he thinks, before the preaching of the gospel, the idea could not rise to the distinct conceptions of the eternal, but on account of its great esoteric character. Therefore, all the creative gods, or personal deities, begin at the second stage of cosmic evolution. Zeus is born in and out of Kronos, time. So is Brahma, the production and emanation of Kala, eternity and time. I want to point out that the differentiation between us and the 4th level of existence is the understanding of time. It is the knowing that time is a thing and having to plan for the future. It is what sets us apart from the other animals. Kala being one of the names of Vishnu. Hence we find Odin, the father of the gods and the Ases, as Brahma is the father of the gods and the Asuras, and hence also the androgyne character of all the chief creative gods, from the second monad of the Greeks down to the Sephiroth, Adam Kadmon, the Brahma or Prajapati Vak of the Vedas, and the androgyne of Plato, which is but another version of the Indian symbol. The best metaphysical definition of primeval theogony in the spirit of the Vedantins may be found in the Notes on the Bhagavad Gita by Mr. T. Subborough. See Theosophist for February of 1887. Para Brahman, the unknown and incognizable, as the lecturer tells his audience, is not ego, it is not non-ego, nor is it consciousness, it is not even Atma. But, though not itself an object of knowledge, it is yet capable of supporting and giving rise to every kind of object and every kind of existence which becomes an object of knowledge. It is the one essence from which starts into existence a center of energy, which he calls Logos. This Logos is the Sabda Brahman of the Hindus, which he will not even call Eswara, the Lord God, lest the term should create confusion in the people's minds. But it is the Avalokiteshvara of the Hindus, the Verbum of the Christians, in its real esoteric meaning, not in the theological disfigurement. It is, he says, the Ganatha, or the ego in the cosmos, and every other ego is but its reflection and manifestation. It exists in a latent condition in the bosom of Parabrahman at the time of Pralaya, during Manvantara. It has a consciousness and an individuality of its own. It is a center of energy, but such centers of energy are almost innumerable in the bosom of Parabrahman. It must not be supposed that even the Logos is the Creator, but that it is but a single center of energy. Their number is almost infinite. This ego, he adds, is the first that appears in cosmos and is the end of all evolution. It is the abstract ego. This is the first manifestation, or aspect, of Parabrahman. When once it starts into conscious being, from its objective standpoint, Parabrahman appears to it as Mula Prakriti. Please bear this in mind, observes the lecturer, for here is the root of the whole difficulty about Purusha and Prakriti felt by the various writers on Vedantic philosophy. This Mula Prakriti is material to it, the Logos, as any material object is material to us. This Mula Prakriti is no more Parabrahman than the bundle of attributes is a pillar is the pillar itself. Parabrahman is an unconditioned and absolute reality, and Mula Prakriti is a sort of veil thrown over it. Parabrahman by itself cannot be seen as it is. It is seen by the Logos, with a veil thrown over it, and that veil is the mighty expanse of cosmic matter. Parabrahman, after having appeared on the one hand as the ego and on the other as Mula Prakriti, acts as the one energy through the Logos. And the lecturer explains what he means by this, acting of something which is nothing, though it is the all, by a fine simile. He compares the Logos to the sun, through which light and heat radiate, but whose energy, light and heat, exist in some unknown condition in space and are diffused in space only as visible light and heat, the sun being only the agent thereof. This is the first triadic hypostasis. The quaternary is made up by this energizing light shed by the Logos. All right, this is an appropriate place to stop and talk about the Spirit, because the Spirit and the Logos are the same thing, right? To me, there is the Trinity. It is intrinsic. It is replicated everywhere, but in us, it is represented by the body, the soul, and the Spirit. Now, the body is the 5D corporeal vessel by which you navigate through space, right? It is the meat suit. The soul is the individualized piece of divinity which makes the decisions for the temple. And the Spirit is the part that allows that to happen. Now, the Spirit is quite literally everything in existence. It is the entirety of the temple and it is all of the space outside of the temples. It is literally every single atom in existence and all of the space between the atoms and the space contained within the atoms. All of that is the spirit. Now, the spirit is plasma. That is another name for it. There are two types of plasma. You have active plasma and you have inactive plasma. Inactive plasma is the inert state of the spirit, right? This miasma out of which we are made and which we breathe, right? When you breathe in, you're literally breathing in the spirit. When you take a drink of something, you're taking a drink of the spirit. It is literally everything. It is the part that allows the now to turn into the next. It is the personification of change. Without the spirit, there is no change. And we can see that visibly through plasma. Now, this lighter creating this flame is creating active plasma. It is taking the inert plasma through the catalyst of the spark and igniting the process of change, which changes the butane into whatever butane changes into when it burns. It's probably a form of carbon monoxide. That change is plasma going from the inactive to the active state. Lightning is the exact same thing. It is the potential of the plasma being activated and producing a visible thing because of that in time. We see the literal changing of the ionic bonds of the plasma as the lightning bolt. The word does the same thing. Now, what does this do, right? What does this do? It creates heat. It creates motion. It creates light. It creates life. That is the Holy Spirit. Motion, heat, life. That is the same for a word. When I speak, the friction of the words come out of my mouth. It creates a toroid that encapsulates me within my divine chakra. It goes out to other people. It can be heard across the room if I do it right. It cannot be heard across the room if I do it right in a different way. But the speaking, the creating, the light, life, and heat that comes from my decision to speak is part of the word, right? The word is how it is created. It is literally the action. It is the motion. Without the word, without life, heat, and motion, everything is in stasis. Everything stays exactly as it is. Without the word being able to take my decision as the soul to wiggle the fingers on my temple, without the spirit enabling the electronic processes by which nerves are sent signals through your nervous system, without that, your fingers don't move. Without that, everything stays still. And so this energizing light, this is literally time in motion, without which we don't really have anything. And I think that's a fairly good explanation of where I stand for all of this, right? When you're making your designations between Parabrahman and Nirvana or whatever other, like I know those aren't the same thing, but whenever you're making those comparisons, right, to me that is talking about the spirit. Whenever it talks about the logos, it is talking about the spirit. These things are all the same to me, and they are just finding different ways to express that. And this energizing light, that is a good way to break into that, because it really is the light, right? It is the motion of the light in motion, right? Light, visible light, is literally heat in motion. It is the change of energy created by the light source. You're changing the filament in a bulb. You are changing the electricity in an LED to something visible. That is quite literally the word in action. So anything electric automatically is going to be the spirit. Anything fire, the exact same thing. So just so we're clear on where I stand about this, and it's going to be pretty much all of this, so I don't have to keep hitting it. Back to the text. The Hebrew Kabbalists give it in a shape which is with the Hebrew Kabbalists, which seriously bit. The Hebrew Kabbalists give it in a shape which esoterically is identical with the Vedantin. Ein Sof, they taught, could not be comprehended, could not be located nor named, though the causeless cause of all. Hence, its name, Ein Sof, is a term of negation. The inscrutable, the incognizable, and the unnameable. They made it, therefore, a boundless circle, a sphere, of which human intellect, with the utmost stretch, could only perceive the vault. In the words of one who has unriddled much in the Kabbalistic system, in one of its meanings, thoroughly, in its numerical and geometrical esotericism. Close your eyes, and from your own consciousness of perception, try and think outward to the extremest limits in every direction. You will find that equal lines, or rays of perception, extend out evenly in all directions, so that the utmost effort of perception will terminate in the vault of a sphere. The limitation of the sphere will, of necessity, be a great circle, and the direct rays of thought, in any and every direction, must be right line radii of the circle. This, then, must be, humanly speaking, the extremest, all-embracing conception of the Ein Sof manifest, which formulates itself as a geometrical figure, vis-a-vis of a circle, with its elements of curved circumference and right line diameter divided in two radii. Hence, a geometrical shape is the first recognizable means of connection between the Ein Sof and the intelligence of man. Footnote. From the Masonic Review for June of 1886. This great circle, which Eastern esotericism reduces to the point within the boundless circle, is the Avalokiteshvara, the logos or verbum, of which Mr. Sabaro speaks. But this circle, or manifested God, is unknown to us, except through its manifested universe, as the One, though easier and rather more possible to our highest conceptions. This Logos, which sleeps in the bosom of Parabrahm during Pralaya, is our ego. As our ego is latent in us at the time of Sushupti, sleep, which cannot cognize Parabrahman otherwise than as Mula Prakriti, the latter being a cosmic veil which is the mighty expanse of cosmic matter, is thus only an organ in cosmic creation, through which radiate the energy and wisdom of Parabrahman, unknown to the Logos as it is to ourselves. Moreover, as the Logos is unknown to us as Parabrahman is unknown in reality to the Logos, both Eastern esotericism and the Kabbalah, in order to bring the Logos within the range of our conceptions, have resolved the abstract synthesis into concrete images, vis-a-vis, into the reflections or multiplied aspects of that Logos or Avalokiteshvara, Brahman, or Mazda, Osiris, Adam, Kadmon, call it by any of these names, which aspects or manvanteric emanations are the Dayan Kohans, the Elohim, the Devas, the Amshapins, etc., etc. Metaphysicians explain the root and germ of the latter, according to Mr. Sabaro, as the first manifestation of Parabrahman, the highest trinity that we are capable of understanding, which is Mula Prakriti, the veil, the Logos, and the conscious energy of the latter, or its power and light. Footnote. Called in the Bhagavad Gita, Dayavi Prakriti, or matter, force, and the ego. Right? That would be my trinity in a different way. Matter being the body, force being the spirit, and the ego being the soul. Or the root of oneself, of which every other kind of self is but a manifestation or a reflection. It is then only in this light of consciousness, of mental and physical perception, that practical occultism can throw this into visibility by geometrical figures, which, when closely studied, will yield not only a scientific explanation of the real objective existence, footnote, objective in the world of Maya, of course, still as real as we are, will yield not only a scientific explanation of the real objective existence of the seven sons of the divine Sophia, which is this light of the Logos, but show by means of other yet undiscovered keys that, with regard to humanity, these seven sons and their numberless emanations, centers of energy personified, are an absolute necessity. Make away with them, and the mystery of being and mankind will never be unriddled, not even closely approached. Now, once again, to me, these seven suns being energy centers are going to be the seven internal chakras, right? You have one more. There are 8 in total that you have access to for yourself. But the 7 internal ones from the bottom to the top are the base, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, throat, third eye, crown. That is 7. That is 7 energetic centers which hold you together. Each one of them holds a different significance for different things, right? The base holds together your body. The sacral is your sexual desires and the desire to generate and produce. The solar plexus is about changing the food into fuel. It is about supplying your digestive system. Your heart regulates your circulatory system, of course. It also controls your hands. Your throat controls your voice. It is literally how you speak into existence, but it is also the part where you choose what you're taking in to create part of you. Right? When you eat, it goes through your mouth into your solar plexus. These two work in conjunction to form you. Your third eye holds together your ability to think, and it controls your conceptions of time. The crown, that's your nervous center. When you get chills, where do they start? Right? That is literally the Holy Spirit talking to you. Right? And so each one of these 7 things have a different responsibility within your body, but they each hold a responsibility, and with any of them not being working correctly, you get sick, you get disease. That is the essence of most of the diseases. There are some that are bottlenecks and things of that nature, but most of it is due to you not being balanced. These 7 suns, to me, is going to represent these 7 chakras every single time. There won't be an 8th one because the 8th, your divine chakra, is the direct link to the divine. Right? That is outside of you, encapsulating all 7 of the other ones. The one divine holds the other 7 together. Right? It is the definition of you. And so, just to be clear, right, when it talks about these 7 energy centers, right, centers of energy personified, that is anthropomorphizing this. Make away with them, and the mystery of being and mankind will never be unriddled, nor even closely approached. There's a reason for that. It is through this light that everything is created, that light being spirit, right? This root of mental self is also the root of physical self. For this light is the permutation, in our manifested world, of Mula Prakriti, called Aditi in the Vedas. In its third aspect, it becomes Vak. Footnote 3. In the course of cosmic manifestation, this Daivi Prakriti, instead of being the mother of Logos, should, strictly speaking, be called his daughter. Notes on the Bhagavad Gita. In its third aspect, it becomes Vak, the daughter and the mother of Logos, as Isis is the daughter and mother of Osiris, who is Horus, and Maute, the daughter, wife, and mother of Ammon, in the Egyptian moon glyph. In the Kabbalah, Sapphira is the same as Shekinah, and is, in another synthesis, the wife, daughter, and mother of the heavenly man, Adam Kadmon, and is even identical with him, just as Vak is identical with Brahma, and is called the female Logos. In the Rig Veda, Vak is mystic speech, by whom occult knowledge and wisdom are communicated to man, and thus Vak is said to have entered the rishis. She is generated by the gods. She is the divine Vak, the queen of the gods, and she is associated, like Sapphira, with the Sephiroth, with the Prajapati in their work of creation. Moreover, she is called the Mother of the Vedas, since it is through her power, as mystic speech, that Brahma revealed them, and also owing to her power that he produced the universe, an example, through speech and words, synthesized by the word and numbers. Now, footnote, the wise men like Stanley Jevons, amongst the moderns, who invented the scheme which makes the incomprehensible assume a tangible form, could only do so by resorting to numbers and geometrical figures. But Vak, being also spoken of as the daughter of Daksha, the god who lives in all the kalpas, her Mayavic character is thereby shown during the pralaya. She disappears, absorbed in the one all-devouring ray. But there are two distinct aspects in universal esotericism, Eastern and Western, in all those personifications of the female power in nature, or nature, the noumenal and the phenomenal. One is its purely metaphysical aspect, as described by the learned lecturer in his notes on the Bhagavad Gita. The other terrestrial and physical, and at the same time divine from the standpoint of practical human conception and occultism. They all are the symbols and personification of chaos, the great deep, or the primordial waters of space, the impenetrable veil between the incognizable and the logos of creation. Connecting himself through his mind with Vak, Brahma, the logos, created the primordial waters. In the Kathaka Upanishad, it is stated still more clearly. Prajapati was this universe. Vak was the second to him. He associated with her. She produced these creatures and again re-entered Prajapati. Footnote. This connects Vak and Sapphira with the goddess Kuan Yin, the merciful mother, the divine voice of the soul, even in exoteric Buddhism, and with the female aspect of Kuan Shayin, the logos, the verbum of creation, and at the same time with the voice that speaks audibly to the initiate, according to esoteric Buddhism. Bathkol, the Philia Vocis, the daughter of the divine voice of the Hebrews, responding from the mercy seat within the veil of the temple, is a result. And here we may incidentally point out one of many unjust slurs thrown by the pious and good missionaries in India on the religion of the land. This allegory in the Satapatha Brahmana, namely, that Brahma, as the father of men, performed the work of procreation by incestuous intercourse with his own daughter Vak, also called Sandhya, twilight, and Satarupa, the hundred-formed, is incessantly thrown into the teeth of the Brahmins as condemning their detestable false religion, besides the fact, conveniently forgotten by the Europeans, that the patriarch Lot is shown guilty of the same crime under the human form, whereas Brahma, or rather Prajapati, accomplished the incest under the form of a buck with his daughter, who had that of a hind, Rohit. The esoteric reading of Genesis, chapter 3, shows the same. Moreover, there is certainly a cosmic, not a physiological meaning attached to the Indian allegory, since Vak is a permutation of Aditi and Mulaprakriti, chaos, and Brahma a permutation of Narayana, the Spirit of God entering into and fructifying nature. Therefore, there is nothing phallic in the conception at all. As already stated, Aditi Vak is the female logos, or the word, verbum, and Sephira in the Kabbalah is the same. These feminine logoi are all correlations in their nominal aspect of light, sound, and ether, showing how well informed were the ancients both in physical science, as now known to the moderns, and as to the birth of that science in the spiritual and astral spheres. Our old writers said that Vak is of four kinds: Para, Pasyanti, Madhyama, Vaikhari, a statement found in the Rig Veda and the Upanishads. Vaikhari Vak is what we utter. It is sound speech, that again, which becomes comprehensive and objective to one of our physical senses, and may be brought under the laws of perception. Hence, every kind of Vaikhari Vak exists in the Madhyama, Pasyanti, and ultimately in its para form. The reason why this is pranava. Footnote. Pranava, like Om, is a mystic term pronounced by the yogis during meditation. Of the terms called, according to exoteric commentators, Vaya Haritis, or Om, Bur, Bhuva, Swar. Om, earth, sky, heaven. Pranava is the most sacred, perhaps. They are pronounced with breast suppressed. See Tu Manu and Mitakshara commenting on the Yajnavahikaya Suriti. But the esoteric explanation goes a deal further. This is why, the reason why this pranava is called Vak is this, that these four principles of the great cosmos correspond to these four forms of Vak. The whole cosmos in its objective form is Vaikhari Vak. The light of the Logos is the Madhyama form, and Logos itself is the Pasyanti form, while Para Brahman is the Para, beyond the noumenon of all noumenon, aspect of that Vak. Notes on the Bhagavad Gita. Thus, Vak, Shekinah, or the music of the spheres of Pythagoras are one, if we take, for our example, instances in the three most, apparently, dissimilar religious philosophies in the world: the Hindu, the Greek, and the Chaldean Hebrew. These personations and allegories may be viewed under 4 chief and 3 lesser aspects, or 7 in all, as in esotericism. The para form is the ever subjective and latent light and sound, which exist eternally in the bosom of the incognizable. When transferred into the ideation of the Logos, or its latent light, it is called Pasyanti, and when it becomes that light expressed, it is Madhyama. Now, the Kabbalah gives the definition thus: there are 3 kinds of light, and that fourth which interpenetrates the others. 1. The clear and the penetrating, the objective light. 2. The reflected light, and 3. The abstract light. The 10 Sephiroth, the 3 and the 7, are called in the Kabbalah the 10 words, the Brim, the Barim, the numbers and the emanations of the heavenly light, which is both Adam, Kadmon, and Sephira, or Brahma, Prajapati Vak. Light, sound, numbers are the 3 factors of creation in the Kabbalah. Para Brahman cannot be known except through the luminous point, the Logos, which knows not Para Brahman but only Mula Prakriti. Similarly, Adam Kadmon knew only Shekinah, though he was the vehicle of Ein Sof, and as Adam Kadmon he is, in the esoteric interpretation of the total, of the number 10, the Sephiroth, himself a trinity, or the 3 attributes of the incognizable deity in one. Footnote. It is this trinity that is meant by the 3 steps of Vishnu, which means Vishnu being considered as the infinite in exotericism, that from the Parabrahm issued Mula Prakriti, Purusha, the Logos, and Prakriti, the four forms, with itself the synthesis of Vak, and in the Kabbalah, Ein Sof, Shekinah, Adam, Kadmon, and Sephirah, the four, or the three emanations being distinct, yet one. When the heavenly man, or Logos, first assumed the form of the crown, footnote, Chaldean Book of Numbers, in the current Kabbalah, the name Yehovah replaces Adam Kadmon. When the heavenly man first assumed the form of the crown, Kether, and identified himself with Sephirah, he caused 7 splendid lights to emanate from it, the crown, which made in their totality 10. So the Brahma Prajapati, once he became separated from, yet identical with, Vak, caused the 7 rishis, the 7 manus or Prajapatis, to issue from that crown. In exotericism, one will always find 10 and 7 of either Sephiroth or Prajapati. In esoteric rendering, always 3 and 7, which also yield 10. Only when divided into the manifested sphere into 3 and 7, they form the circle with the vertical line, the androgyne, and the swastika, rightly portrayed, or the figure X manifested and differentiated. This will help the student to understand why Pythagoras esteemed the deity, the Logos, to be the center of unity and source of harmony. We say this deity was Logos, not the monad that dwelleth in solitude and silence, because Pythagoras taught that unity, being indivisible, is no number. And this is also why it was required of the candidate who applied for admittance into his school that he should have already studied as a preliminary step the sciences of arithmetic, astronomy, geometry, and music, held as the 4 divisions of mathematics. Footnote 3. Justin Martyr tells us that, owing to his ignorance of these 4 sciences, he was rejected by the Pythagoreans as a candidate for admission into their school. Again, this explains why the Pythagoreans asserted that the doctrine of numbers, the chief of all in esotericism, had been revealed to man by the celestial deities, that the world had been called forth out of chaos by sound or harmony, and constructed according to the principles of musical proportion, that the 7 planets, which rule the destiny of mortals, have a harmonious motion, and intervals corresponding to musical diastemes, rendering various sounds so perfectly consonant that they produce the sweetest melody, which is inaudible to us by reason of the greatness of the sound, which our ears are incapable of receiving. Censorinus. In the Pythagorean Theogony, the hierarchies of the heavenly host and gods were numbered and expressed numerically. Pythagoras had studied esoteric science in India. Therefore, we find his pupils saying, "The monad, the manifested one, is the principle of all things. From the monad and the indeterminate duad, chaos, numbers, from numbers, points, from points, lines, from lines, superficies, from superficies, solids, from these, solid bodies, whose elements are 4, fire, water, air, earth, of all which transmuted, correlated, and totally changed, the world consists. Diogenes, Laertius, and there's something Pythagoras. And this may also, if it does not unriddle the mystery altogether, at any rate lift a corner off the veil of those wondrous allegories that have been thrown upon Vak, the most mysterious of all the Brahmanical goddesses, who is termed the melodious cow who milked forth sustenance and water, the earth with all her mystic powers, and again she, who yields us nourishment and sustenance, physical earth, Isis is also mystic nature and also earth, and her cow's horns identify her with Vok. The latter, after having been recognized in her highest form as Para, becomes at the lower or material end of creation via Kari. Hence, she is mystic, though physical, nature with all her magical ways and properties. Again, as goddess of speech and sound and a permutation of Aditi, she is chaos in one sense. At any rate, she is the mother of the gods, and it is from Brahma, Iswara, or the Logos, and Vak, as from Adam, Kadmon, and Sapphira, that the real manifested theogony has to start. Beyond, all is darkness and abstract speculation, with the Dayan Kohans, or the gods, the seers, the prophets, and the adepts in general, are on firm ground. Whether as Aditi or the divine Sophia of the Greek Gnostics, she is the mother of the seven sons, angels of the face of the deep, or the great green one of the Book of the Dead, says the Book of Daizan, knowledge through meditation. The Great Mother lay with the triangle, and the line, and the square, the second, and the pentagram in her bosom, ready to bring them forth. There's a footnote on pentagram. The synthesis, or the host unified in the Logos, and the point called in Roman Catholicism the angel of the face, and in Hebrew, who is like unto, or the same as God, the manifested representation. And the pentagram in her bosom, ready to bring them forth, the valiant sons of the square triangle, double line, or 4,320,000, the cycle, whose two elders are the circle and the point. At the beginning of every cycle of 4,320,000, the seven, or as some nations had it, 8, great gods descended to establish the new order of things and give the impetus of the new cycle. That 8th god was the unifying circle, or Logos, separated and made distinct from its host. That fits exactly with what I believe. In exoteric dogma, just as the three divine hypostases of the ancient Greeks are now considered in the churches as three distinct personae. The mighty ones perform their great works and leave behind them everlasting monuments to commemorate their visit every time they penetrate within our myopic veil, atmosphere, says a commentary. Footnote. Appearing at the beginning of cycles, as also of every sidereal year of 25,868 years, therefore the Kabiri or Kabarim received their name in Chaldea, as it means the measures of heaven from Kob, measure of, and Urim, heavens. I want to point out once again that these numbers are pretty arbitrary, right? We have not, as of yet, found any reason for these extraordinarily large numbers. Now, I hold some unconventional beliefs, and one of those is the 12,000-year disaster cycle, which is scientifically trackable, traceable, right? Not in extreme detail, but at least enough to assume that there might be something there. That aligns fairly closely, right, with what was the exact 25,000. If you take the 12,000 and you double it, right? Now, the 12,000 is not a precise year because guess what? Nobody knows the precise number of years, but it is fairly close to 12,000 years for the great cycle, close to 6,000 years for the smaller cycle, which occurs at the half point. And so it is possible that this number is an extrapolation of an actual knowledge of the 12,000-year disaster cycle being broke down into, what would this be, 12,700 or 2,700, or no, 1,700. Yeah. 434 years, right? Maybe that's the precise number and this is it doubled. Who knows? But I have not as of yet come across a solid reasoning for any of the numbers that they use. Whether it is the smaller number, where was it, right? Of the 4 million, or whether it's the the 25,000 or whether it's, what was it, 40 billion or something. We don't have a reason for the numbers, right? It is merely extrapolations of visions. And so, like, I have a reason for the 12,000 number that I use. You may not agree with it, but at least I have a reasoning for it. I don't have a reasoning for these numbers. That annoys me more than anything. Back to the text. Thus, we are taught that the Great Pyramids were built under the direct supervision. When Daruva, the then pole star, was at his lowest culmination, and the Kuritika, Pleiades, looked over his head, were on the same meridian but above, to watch the work of the giants. Thus, as the first pyramids were built at the beginnings of the sidereal year, under Daruva, Alpha Polaris, it must have been over 31,000 years, 31,105 to be exact, ago. Now, it is beyond dispute that it is older than the current modern interpretation. I mean, the pyramids are most definitely older than 6,000 years. Most definitely. How exactly much older than that it is speculation. This can be correct. It does not have to be correct. It is entirely possible that it was built 31,105 years ago, but we do not know that. That would be almost 3 cycles ago. So it's possible, but again, we do not have any evidence of that. Bunsen was right in admitting for Egypt an antiquity of over 21,000 years, but this concession hardly exhausts truth and fact in this question. And there is good reason to believe that as well, right? I have done, in the Ancient Lore playlist, the works of Plato, not all of them in its entirety, but several of them, and part of that was Critias and Timaeus, where he talks about Atlantis and the fall thereof, and the fact that it was recorded in Egypt prior to Solon that there had been many of the great cycles already passed. It doesn't say how many. It could be 2, it could be 4. This would put it close to 3. That's entirely a possibility. And if you're interested in more of that, the Ancient Lore playlist holds the Plato works. They also have their own playlist, but I don't link that one, so you'll have to find it on your own. Back to the text. The stories told by the Egyptian priest and others of timekeeping in Egypt are now beginning to look less like lies in the sight of all who have escaped from biblical bondage, writes the author of The Natural Genesis. Inscriptions have lately been found at Saqqara, making mention of 2 Sothaic cycles registered at that time, now some 6,000 years ago. Thus, when Herodotus was in Egypt, the Egyptians had, as now known, observed at least 5 different Sothaic cycles of 1,461 years. The priest informed the Greek inquirer that time had been reckoned by them for so long that the sun had twice risen where it had then set, and twice set where it then arose. This can only be realized as a fact in nature by means of 2 cycles of precession, or a period of 51,736 years. This is more speculation. Now, it is entirely possible I have not read this source material, so I don't know what the Greeks said about or the Egyptians said about their cycle. But 5 times 1,000 is 5,000, so at best we're looking closer to 7, which would be 1 minor cycle. And so that is probably not correct. Now, there are many other minor cycles within the 2, the major and the opposite, right? You have the fire cycle, you have the wet cycle, and there are various other permutations of that cycle within those cycles. So after the first fire cycle, you're going to get a smaller fire cycle some undesignated period of time later, and that could be 1,500 years. So that is entirely possible. But this next part, this is interesting. Time had been reckoned by them for so long that the sun had twice risen where it set, and twice set where it then arose. That goes into another one of my unconventional beliefs, but it is the same one contained in the 12,000-year disaster cycle. I believe that at part of that cycle, at the greater part of the cycle, which would be the 12,000 year, it's possible at the 6,000 year too, but I don't have as much evidence for that as I do for the 12,000 year one, that the planet shifts 90 degrees on its axis, and it's a crustal shift, right? The poles flip and the electromagnetics that hold our crust in place move along with it. And when that happens, where the North and the South Pole are aligned with the equator. Where the equator is comes aligned with the prime meridian. And so, through that action, this is possible, right? That the sun used to rise up over here, but now it rises up over here. Right? That is a 90-degree shift, and in some places it will appear to be more than 90 degrees. In some places it will appear to be less than 90 degrees because of the curvature of the sphere upon which we are and the way that it will relatively shift. So it is entirely possible that this part is a confirmation of the thing that I believe. But that is me looking for the confirmation, so take it with a grain of salt. Go back and watch the 12,000-year disaster cycle and all of the various reasons why that is believed, and see if it fits for you as well as it does for me, because that is only explained that's not explained by the precession of the equinox at all. Right? That's a 15-degree shift. Okay, fine. 15 degrees is not, it used to rise here and now it rises there. Right? Because that's what this is saying. This is saying the sun had twice risen where it then set. And so those are swapped according to this. And that is only explained by the rotation of the earth. Now, that might be 180 degrees and I'm wrong. But that is only explained by the earth shifting on its actual axis. Back to the text. More Isaac, see Kircher's Oedipius, shows the ancient Syrians defining their world of the rulers and the active gods in the same way as the Chaldeans. The lowest world was the sublunary, our own, watched by the angels of the first or lower order. The ones that came next in rank was Mercury, ruled by the archangels. Then came Venus, whose gods were the principalities. The fourth was that of the sun, the domain and region of the highest and mightiest gods of our system, the solar gods of all nations. The fifth was Mars, ruled by the virtues. The sixth, that of Bel, or Jupiter, was governed by the dominions. The seventh, the world of Saturn, by the thrones. These are the worlds of form. Above come the four higher ones, making seven again. Since the three highest are unmentionable and unpronounceable, the eighth, composed of 1,122 stars, is the domain of cherubs. The ninth, belonging to the walking and numberless stars, on account of their distance, has the seraphs. As to the 10th, Kircher, quoting More Isaac, says that it is composed of invisible stars that could be taken, they said, for clouds. So massed are they in the zone that we call Via Stratminis, the Milky Way, and he hastens to explain that these are the stars of Lucifer, engulfed with him in his terrible shipwreck. That which comes after and beyond the 10th world, our quaternary, or the Arupa world, the Syrians could not tell. All they knew was that it is there that begins the vast and incomprehensible ocean of the infinite, the abode of the true divinity without boundary or end. Champollion shows the same belief among the Egyptians. Hermes, having spoken of the Father, Mother, and Son, whose spirit collectively the divine fiat shapes the universe, says. 7 agents, mediums, were also formed to contain the material or manifested worlds within their respective circles, and the action of these agents was named destiny. He further enumerates 7 and 10 and 12 orders, which would take too long to detail here. We have dealt in some measure with Hermes Trismegistus as well on the Ancient Lore playlist. As the Rigvedhana, together with the Brahmana Purana, and all such works, whether describing the magic efficiency of the Rigvedic mantras or the future kalpas, are declared by Dr. Weber and others to be modern compilations, belonging probably only to the time of the Puranas. It is useless to refer the reader to their mystic explanations, and one may as well quote simply from the archaic books utterly unknown to the Orientalist. These works explain that which so puzzles the scholars, namely that the Saptarishi, the mind-born sons of Brahma, are referred to in the Satapatha Brahmana under one set of names, in the Mahabharata under another set, and that the Vayu Purana makes even 9 instead of 7 rishis by adding the names of Bhrigu and Daksha to the list. But the same occurs in every exoteric scripture. The secret doctrine gives a long genealogy of the rishis, but separates them into many classes, like the gods of the Egyptians, who were divided into 7 and even 12 classes. So are the Indian rishis in their hierarchies. The first 3 groups are the divine, the cosmical, and the sublunary. Then come the solar gods of our system, the planetary, the submundane, and the purely human, the heroes, and the manushi. At present, however, we are only concerned with the pre-cosmic divine gods, the Prajapati or the 7 builders. This group is found unmistakably in every cosmogony, owing to the loss of the Egyptian archaic documents, since, according to M. Maspero, the materials and historical data on hand to study the history of the religious evolution in Egypt are neither complete nor very often intelligible. In order to have the statements brought forward from the secret doctrine corroborated partially and indirectly, the ancient hymns and inscriptions on the tombs must be appealed to. One such, at any rate, shows that Osiris was, like Brahma Prajapati, Adam Kadmon, Ormazd, and so many other Logwai, the chief and the synthesis of the group of creators, or builders. Before Osiris became the one and the highest god of Egypt, he was worshipped at Abydos as the head or leader of the heavenly host of the builders, belonging to the higher of the 3 orders. The hymn engraved on the votive stela of the tomb from Abydos, 3rd register, addresses Osiris thus: "Salutations to thee, Osiris, eldest son of Sib. Thou, the greatest of the 6 gods, issued from the goddess Nu, primordial water. Thou, the great favorite of thy father Ra, father of fathers, king of duration, master in eternity, who, as soon as these issued from thy mother's bosom, gathered all of the crowns, and attached the uraeus, serpent, or naja, on thy head." Footnote on naja. This Egyptian word naja reminds one a good deal of the Indian Naga, the serpent god. Brahma and Shiva and Vishnu are all crowned with and connected with Nagas, a sign of their cyclic and cosmic character. On thy head, multiform god whose name is unknown and who has many names in towns and provinces. Coming out of the primordial water, crowned with the uraeus, which is the serpent emblem of cosmic fire, and himself the 7th over the 6 primary gods, issued from Father Mother, now and Naut, the sky. Who can Osiris be but the chief Prajapati, the chief Sephiroth, the chief Amshashpind or Mazd? that this latter solar and cosmic God stood in the beginning of religious evolution in the same position as the archangel whose name was secret is certain. This archangel was the representative on earth of the hidden Jewish God, Michael. In short, it is his face that is said to have gone before the Jews like a pillar of fire. Burnoff says, the seven Amshapins, who are most assuredly our archangels, designate also the personification of the divine virtues. Comment on the Yagna. And these archangels, therefore, are as certainly the Saptarishi of the Hindus, though it is the next to impossible to class each with its pagan prototype and parallel, since, as in the case of Osiris, they have also many names and towns and provinces. Some of the most important, however, will be shown in their order. One thing is thus undeniably proven. The more one studies their hierarchies and finds out their identity, the more proofs one acquires that there is not one of the past and present personal gods, known to us from the earliest days of history, that does not belong to the third stage of cosmic manifestation. In every religion we find the concealed deity forming the groundwork, then the ray therefrom that falls into primordial cosmic matter, first manifestation. Then the androgyne result, the dual male and female abstract force, personified second stage. This separates itself finally into the third, into seven forces, called the creative powers by all the ancient religions, and the virtues of God by the Christians. The latter explanation and metaphysical abstract qualifications have never prevented the Roman and Greek churches from worshiping these virtues under the personifications and distinct names of the seven archangels. In the book of Drushim, page 59, in the Talmud, a distinction between these groups is given, which is the correct Kabbalistic explanation. It says, we're going to stop real quick and talk. There are seven internal chakras. They represent in very real ways the virtues and the vices. Now, you cannot separate the virtues and the vices. They are coins. One side is the virtue, the other side is the vice. They are a sliding scale. At 0, there is the vice. At 1, there is a virtue. And in between is existence. They correspond with the various chakras. The base covers wrath and love. The sacral covers lust and chastity. The solar plexus is gluttony and temperance. Then each one of them corresponds with a different virtue and vice. I'm outlining this in more detail in the book that I'm putting out, but there will also be a video to accompany it, and I've already done it once in a different way with the 7 facets of God, which is part of the Bible study. All right. It says, there are three groups or orders of Sephiroth. First, the Sephiroth called the divine attributes, abstract. Second, the physical or sidereal Sephiroth, personal. One group of 7, the other of 10. Third, the metaphysical Sephiroth, the periphrasis of Jehovah, who are the first 3 Sephiroth, Kether, Kokma, and Bina. The rest of the 7 being the personal 7 spirits of the presence, also of the planets. Now, also in addition to the 7, right, there is a 3. Right? The number of manifestation is 1, 3, and 8. 8 being the 7 internal and the 1 external. 3 being the Trinity, the body, the soul, and the spirit, but also the as above, so below, unified. The as above are going to be what is described here, right? The first, the divine attributes. That is going to be the more spiritual side of things. That includes the throat, the third eye, and the crown, right? The voice to give direction and understanding, the third eye to see forward in time, the crown to understand what you're receiving and to think. That is the upper, the as above. The as below are the three lower. It is the base, the sacral, and the solar plexus. They govern the earthly things. It is base existence, your body and its functions. It is the sexual desires, right? That is the second one. And the third one is the food that you eat. That is the as below. So the as below, as on earth, the as above, as in heaven, and those together, linked through the heart, becomes the three into one. In the same way, it is a trinity, right? The body being the lower, the upper being the direction, and the heart being the spirit. It is body, soul, spirit. Those, in accordance with each other, is how manifestation happens. The one through the three with the eight allows it to happen. And once again, this is something that I am outlining in more detail in the book that I'm writing, so it will be coming. It's coming, I promise. I've finished the rough draft. I got things to add, but we're getting there. The same division has to be applied to the primary, secondary, and tertiary evolution of gods in every theogony, if one wishes to translate the meaning esoterically. We must not confuse the purely metaphysical personifications of the abstract attributes of deity with their reflection, the sidereal gods. This reflection, however, is in reality the objective expression of the abstraction, living entities, and the models formed on that divine prototype. Moreover, the three metaphysical Sephiroth, or the periphrasis of Jehovah, are not Jehovah. It is the latter himself with the additional titles of Adonai, Elohim, Sabaoth, and the numerous names lavished on him, who is the periphrasis of the Shaddai, the omnipotent. The name is a circumlocution. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Circumlocution. Indeed, a too abundant figure of Jewish rhetoric, and has always been denounced by the occultists. To the Jewish Kabbalists, and even the Christian alchemists and Rosicrucians, Jehovah was a convenient screen, unified by the folding of its many flaps, and adopted as a substitute, one name of an individual Sephiroth being as good as another name for those who had the secret. The Tetragrammaton, the ineffable, the sidereal sum total, was invented for no other purpose than to mislead the profane and to symbolize life and generation. Footnote. Says the translator of Avisabron's Kabbalah, Mr. Isaac Meyer, LLB, of Philadelphia, of this sum total. The letter of Kether is Yod, of Bina, He, together Yah, the feminine name. The third letter, that of Hokmah, is Vau, making together Yav, of Yahweh, the Tetragrammaton, and really the complete symbol of its officiousness. The last, He, of this inevitable name, being always applied to the six lower, and the last, together, the seven remaining Sephiroth. Thus, the Tetragrammaton is wholly only in its abstract synthesis. As a quaternary containing the lower seven Sephiroth, it is phallic. The real secret and unpronounceable name, the word that is no word, has to be sought in the seven names of the first seven emanations, or the sons of the fire, in the secret scriptures of all the great nations, and even in the Zohar, the Kabbalistic lore of that smallest of all, the Jewish. This word, composed of 7 letters in each tongue, is found embodied in the architectural remains of every grand building in the world. From the Cyclopean remains on Easter Island, part of the continent buried under the seas, nearly 4 million years ago, that is almost certainly an incorrect number, than 20,000. Footnote. The statement will, of course, be found preposterous and absurd and simply laughed at. But if one believes in the final submersion of Atlantis 850,000 years ago, as taught in esoteric Buddhism, that is entirely against the only record we have. We have one record of Atlantis in reality. That is Plato and Timaeus, maybe Critias, one of the two. That's why I pointed it out earlier. That is literally the only written record of a timeline for Atlantis as far as I am aware. This is pulled completely out of Yaya as far as I am aware. If there is something that I am missing outside of esoteric Buddhism, let me know. But this 850,000 years ago is almost certainly incorrect. It is recorded by Solon much more recent than that. 12,000 years is a very good number for that, for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is that that's the number that was actually recorded. Where this 850,000 came from, I don't know. It does not make any sense outside of the math that they use to get their really big numbers. The gradual first sinking having begun during the Eocene age. And again, that is not what is recorded. It was overnight. It happened quickly. That is what's recorded. As far as I am aware, there is no other recording of that. Right. All right. One has to accept the statement for the so-called Lemuria, the continent of the third root race, first nearly destroyed by combustion and then submerged. This is what the commentary says. The first earth having been purified by the 49 fires, her people, born of fire and water, could not die, etc. The second earth, with its rays, disappeared as vapor vanishes in the air. The third earth had everything consumed on it after the separation, and went down into the lower deep, the ocean. This was twice 82 cyclic years ago. Now a cyclic year is what we call a sidereal year, and is founded on the precession of the equinoxes, or 25,868 years each. So that's where you're getting that number from, but you're wrong. And this is equal, therefore, in all to 4,242,352 years. More details will be found in the text of Book 2. Meanwhile, this doctrine is embodied in the Kings of Edom. All right, so the precession is not accurately recorded here, first off, but this cyclic year is probably not what they are assuming that it is. They are assuming that it is the precession of the equinox. That is not necessarily true. Right, that is an assumption, and it may even be an accurate one. Right, we'll leave that like that because, once again, I believe something does not necessarily make it true. But the 12,000-year disaster cycle is a much better fit for a variety of reasons, not the least of which are trackable, traceable things that happened on the planet during the time period. Now, this 25,000 years would be a doubling of that. So it would have been 2 cycles ago as opposed to 1 cycle ago. That would have been a fire cycle, right? 12,000 years ago was fire, 6,000 years ago was water. We are coming back upon fire now. And 12,000 years before the 12,000 years would have been another fire. It goes fire, water, fire, water, fire, water. That is literally the repeatable cycle. And so this could have been 2 cycles ago. It could be that there is a separate account, because it is entirely possible that Atlantis sunk and then rose and then sunk again, right? But that last sinking is recorded as have being overnight. In a single day, everything was gone. That is the recording, not a gradual one, not first sinking and then like. It is possible that it sank and rose again because of isostases and the various things that we talk about in this video. But when the Earth changes and the poles realign, the bulge in the center around the equator has to realign as well. And so that bulge is going to shrink, and where the prime meridian is now, roughly, is going to grow. Now, that may not be along the 0, it may be along the 180, right? But it may be at 45. We don't know where the exact point of the new equator will be, but that point will get wider. And if it is in alignment with where Atlantis was, Atlantis will come up from the earth, from under the water. That is the physics that happened of isostasis, right? The weight of the earth, of the water, molds and holds the earth in shape in great part. And so if it moves and the pressure relieves, then growth is going to be in different ways. So this very well could be a representation that is being misinterpreted. The first earth having been purified by 49 fires, that would have been the first, right? And then the second with vapor. The third would be again fire, but then it went down into the lower deep. This was 2 cycles ago of the Great Cycle. That would be 25,000 years, right? The Great Cycle being 12,000 years, roughly. And so this does make sense. Like, this number does make it, like, I do understand where the 25,000 came from now, but I don't think that it is an accurate representation. All right, where were we? Right here. Down to the earliest Egyptian pyramids. We shall have to enter more fully upon this subject and bring practical illustrations to prove the statements made in the text. For the present, it is sufficient to show, by a few instances, the truth of what was asserted at the beginning of this monograph, namely, that no cosmogony, the world over, with the sole exception of the Christian, has ever attributed to the one highest cause, the universal deific principle, the immediate creation of our earth, man, or anything connected with these. I do. Right? I do. When it says that the Word formed the earth, that is God speaking, right? It is the Spirit in motion. Everything was created from the Spirit in motion. It doesn't have to be from me coming from this higher realm through this middle realm into a lower realm. I don't believe in that. And so, for me, it is entirely possible, right? I do believe that it is the God, like the God, the one beyond all of our comprehension, who is the creator and the architect, with no personification being necessary. This statement holds as good for the Hebrew or Chaldean Kabbalah as it does for Genesis, had the latter ever been thoroughly understood and, what is more important, correctly translated. That is true as well. Footnote. The same reserve is found in the Talmud in every national system of religion, whether monotheistic or exoterically polytheistical. From the superb religious poem by the Kabbalist Rabbi Solomon ben Gabriel in the Kether Makuth, we select a few definitions given in the prayer of Kippur. Thou art one, the beginning of all numbers and the foundation of all edifices. Thou art one. In the secret of thy unity, the wisest of men are lost because they know it not. Thou art one, and thy unity is never diminished, never extended, and cannot be changed. Thou art one, but not as an element of numeration, for thy unity admits not of multiplication, change, or form. Thou art existent, but the understanding and vision of mortals cannot attain to thy existence, nor determine for thee the where, the how, and the why. Thou art existent, but in thyself alone, there being none other that can exist with thee. Thou art existent before all time and without place. Thou art existent, and thy existence is so profound and secret that none can penetrate and discover thy secrecy. Thou art living, but within no time that can be fixed or known. Thou art living, but not by a spirit or a soul, for thou art thyself the soul of all souls, etc., etc. There is a distance between this Kabbalistic deity and the biblical Jehovah, the spiteful and revengeful God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who tempted the former and wrestled with the last. No Vedantin but would repudiate such a parabrum. Everywhere there is a logos, a light, shining in darkness, truly, or the architect of the world is esoterically a plural number. The Latin Church, paradoxical as ever, while applying the epithet of Creator to Jehovah alone, adapts a whole kyrielle of names for the working forces of the latter, those names betraying a secret. For if the said forces had naught to do with creation, so called, why call them Elohim, Alhim in plural, divine workmen, and energies, energia, incandescent celestial stones, Lepidis igniti colorium, and especially supporters of the world, cosmocratores, governors or rulers of the world, rectores mundi, the wheels of the world, rotae, Ophanim, flames and powers, sons of God, B'nai Alhim, vigilant counselors, etc., etc. It was often premised, and unjustly as usual, that China, nearly as old a country as India, had no cosmogony. It was unknown to the Confucius, and the Buddhists extended their cosmogony without introducing a personal God. Footnote. It is complained. Footnote. Reverend Joseph Edkins on Cosmogony, page 320, and very wisely they have acted. The Yi King, the very essence of ancient thought and combined work of the most venerated sages, fails to show a distinct cosmogony. Nevertheless, there is one, and a very distinct one, only as Confucius did not admit of a future life. Footnote. If he rejected it, it was on the grounds of what he calls the changes, in other words, rebirths of man and constant transformations. He denied immortality to the personality of man, as we do, not to man. Only as Confucius did not admit of a future life, and the Chinese Buddhists reject the idea of one creator, accepting one cause and its numberless effects, they are misunderstood by the believers in a personal God. The great extreme, as the commencement of changes, transmigrations, is the shortest and perhaps the most suggestive of all cosmogonies for those who, like Confucianists, love virtue for its own sake and try to do good unselfishly without perpetually looking to reward and profit. The great extreme of Confucius produces two figures. These two produce in their turn the four images, these again the 8 symbols. It is complained that though the Confucianists see in them heaven, earth, and man in miniature, we can see in them anything we like. No doubt, and so it is with regard to many symbols, especially in those of the latest religions. But they who know something of occult numerals see in these figures the symbol, however rude, of a harmonious progressive evolution of cosmos and its beings, both the heavenly and the terrestrial. And anyone who has studied the numerical evolution in the primeval cosmogony of Pythagoras, a contemporary of Confucius, can never fail to find in his triad, tetractys, and decade, emerging from the one and solitary monad, the same idea. Confucius is laughed at by his Christian biographer for talking of divination before and after this passage, and is represented as saying, "The 8 symbols determine good and ill fortune, and these lead to great deeds. There are no imitable images greater than heaven and earth. There are no changes greater than the 4 seasons," meaning north, south, east, and west. "There are no suspended images brighter than the sun and moon. In preparing things for use, there is none greater than the sage. In determining an ill luck, there is nothing greater than the divining straws and the tortoise." Footnote. He may be laughed at by the Protestants, but the Roman Catholics have no right to mock him, without becoming guilty of blasphemy and sacrilege. For it is over 200 years since Confucius was canonized as a saint in China by the Roman Catholics, who have thereby obtained many converts among the ignorant Confucianists. Therefore, the divining straws and the tortoise, the symbolic sets of lines, and the great sage who looks at them as they become 1 and 2 become 4, and 4 become 8, and the other sets 3 and 6, are laughed to scorn only because his wise symbols are misunderstood. So the author and his colleagues will scoff, no doubt, at the stanzas given in our text, for they represent precisely the same idea. The old archaic map of cosmogony is full of lines in the Confucian style, of concentric circles and dots. Yet all these represent the most abstract and philosophical conceptions of the cosmogony of our universe. At all events, it may answer, perhaps, better to the requirements and the scientific purposes of our age than the cosmogonical essays of St. Augustine and the Venerable Bede, though these were published over a millennium later than the Confucian. Confucius, in one of the greatest sages of the ancient world, believed in ancient magic and practiced it himself. If we take for granted the statements of Yu, and he praised it to the skies in Yiqing, we are told by his reverend critic. Nevertheless, even in his age, in example 600 BC, Confucius and his school taught the sphericity of the earth and even the heliocentric system, while at about thrice 600 years after the Chinese philosopher, the popes of Rome threatened and even burnt heretics for asserting the same. He is laughed at for speaking of the sacred tortoise. No unprejudiced person can see any great difference between a tortoise and a lamb as candidates for sacredness, as both are symbols and no more. The ox, the eagle, footnote, the animals regarded as sacred in the Bible are not few. The goat, for one, the Azazel, or God of Victory, as Ibn Ezra says, "If thou art capable of comprehending the mystery of Azazel, thou wilt learn the mystery of his God's name, for it has similar associates in Scriptures. I will tell thee by allusion one portion of the mystery. When thou shalt have 33 years of age, thou wilt comprehend me." So with the mystery of the tortoise, rejoicing over the poetry of biblical metaphors, associating with the name of Jehovah, incandescent stones, sacred animals, etc., quoting from the Bible de Venise. A French pious writer says, "Indeed, all of them are Elohim like their God, for these angels assume, through a holy usurpation, the very divine name of Jehovah each time they represent him." No one ever doubted that the name must have been assumed when under the guise of the infinite, one incognizable, the Malachim, messengers, descended to eat and drink with men. But if the Elohim, and even lower beings, assuming the God name, were and are still worshipped, why should the same Elohim be called devils when appearing under the names of other gods? The ox, the eagle, and the lion, and occasionally the dove, are the sacred animals of the Western Bible, the first three being found grouped round the evangelist, and the fourth, the human face, is a seraph. In example, a fiery serpent, the Gnostic agatheo-demon, probably. Footnote. The choice is curious and shows how paradoxical were the first Christians in their selections. For why should they have chosen these symbols of Egyptian paganism when the eagle is never mentioned in the New Testament, save once, when Jesus refers to it as a carrion eater? And in the Old Testament it is called unclean, that the lion made a point of comparison with Satan, both roaring for men to devour, and the oxen are driven out of the temple. On the other hand, the serpent, brought as an exemplar of wisdom to follow, is now regarded as the symbol of the devil, the esoteric pearl of Christ's religion degraded into Christian theology, may indeed be said to have chosen a strange and unfitting shell to be born in and evolved from. As explained, the sacred animals, or the flames or sparks, within the Holy Four, refer to the prototypes of all that is found in the universe in the divine thought, in the root, which is the perfect cube, or the foundation of the cosmos, collectively and individually. They have all an occult reference to primordial cosmic forms and its first concretions, work, and evolution. In the earliest Hindu exoteric cosmogonies, it is not even the demiurge who creates. For it is said in one of the Puranas that the great architect of the world gives the first impulse to the rotary motion of our planetary system by stepping in turn over each planet and body. It is this action that causes each sphere to turn around itself and all around the sun, after which action it is the Brahmandika, the solar and lunar Pitris, the Dhyana Kohans, who take charge of their respective spheres, earths, and planets, at the end of the Kalpa. The creators are the rishis, most of whom are credited with the authorship of the mantras or hymns of the Rig Veda. They are sometimes 7, sometimes 10. When they become Prajapati, the lords of being, then they re-become the 7 and the 14 Manus as the representatives of the 7 and 14 cycles of existence, days of Brahma, thus answering to the 7 eons, when at the end of the first stage of evolution they are transformed into the 7 stellar rishis, the Saptarishis, while their human doubles appear as heroes, kings, and sages on the earth. The esoteric doctrine of the East, having thus furnished and struck the keynote, which is as scientific as it is philosophical and poetical, as may be seen under its allegorical garb, every nation has followed its lead. It is from the exoteric religions that we have to dig out the root idea before we turn to esoteric truth, lest the latter should be rejected. Furthermore, every symbol in every national religion may be read esoterically, and the proof furnished for its being correctly read by transliterating it into its corresponding numerals and geometrical forms. I disagree with that, right? I just said that I don't believe in gematria, and that holds true for it being a proof of anything, ever, at any point in time. Corresponding numerals and geometrical forms by the extraordinary agreement of all. That is not to say the numbers cannot be important, right? If you see the number 222, it is telling you something, right? A repeated pattern, not just a simple occurrence, but you see 222 on the clock, and then you see it on a billboard, and then you see it somewhere else. That is telling you a choice is coming in your life, right? You're facing a choice. That's literally what that means. 1 is that there is an awareness of a new situation. 3 is that there is more to learn about a situation. 4 means that you are on the path of mastery, right? These all have numbers. They all have reasons, but they're simple. If you're doing complicated mathematics, you're doing it wrong. If multiplication is involved, you're doing it wrong. If you have to add together a name in order to get a number and then to translate that into something else, you're doing it wrong. It is just too complicated. It is more than your need. Can it be true? Yeah. But is it? Probably not. And so I don't take it as a proof. You can make gematria fit whatever you want it to fit by changing some small little variable somewhere in the equation, and then all of a sudden it is a proof. To me, it will never be a proof. The simple numbers, right? The circle even, like even the representatives, the triangle, the square, these things have reasons. They have a purpose behind them. The complicated adding together of the numbers, not as much. By the extraordinary agreement of all, with notable exceptions, however much the glyphs and symbols may vary among themselves. For, in the origins, these symbols are all identical. Take, for instance, the opening sentences in various cosmogonies. In every case, it is either a circle, an egg, or a head. Darkness is always associated with its first symbol and surrounds it, as shown in the Hindu, the Egyptian, and the Chaldeo-Hebrew, and even the Scandinavian systems. Hence, black ravens, black doves, black waters, and even black flames. The 7th tongue of Agni, the fire god, being called Kali, the black, as it was like a black, flickering flame. 2 black doves flew from Egypt, and settling on the oaks of Dodona, gave their names to the Grecian gods. Noah lets out a black raven after the deluge, which is a symbol for the cosmic pralaya, after which began the real creation or evolution of our earth and humanity. That is not necessarily true. Odin's black ravens fluttered Odin's black ravens fluttered around the goddess Saga and whispered to her of the past and the future. What is the real meaning of all those black birds? They are all connected with the primeval wisdom which flows out of the pre-cosmic source of all, symbolized by the head, the circle, the egg. And they all have an identical meaning and relate to the primordial archetypal man. Adam, Cadmon, the creative origin of all things, which is composed of the host of cosmic powers, the creative Diane Kohans, beyond which all is darkness. Let us inquire of the wisdom of the Kabbalah, even veiled and distorted as it now is, to explain its numerical language and approximate meaning, at least of the word raven. This is its number value as given in the source of measures. Here we go. The term raven is used but once and taken as Eth Habarev, 678, or 113 times 6. While the dove is mentioned 5 times, its value is 71, and 71 times 5 is 355. 6 diameters, or the raven, crossing, would divide the circumference of a circle by 355 into 12 parts or compartments. The 355 subdivided for each unit by 6 would equal 213 minus 0, or the head, beginning in the first verse of Genesis. This, divided or subdivided after the same fashion by 2, or the 355 by 12, would give 213 minus 2, or the words Barash, or the first word of Genesis with its prepositional prefix, signifying the same concreted general form astronomically with the one here intended. This, to me, is just pure speculation. This is pure nonsense, right? It is possible that it is correct, but it is not likely so. You can read into this complicated mathematics whatever you want, right? You can say that this is the representative of the term raven, but who makes that correct? What is to say that it is not a different dialect of the same language? What is to say that it is not a different spelling of the same language? What is to say that it is even this word at all? All of this is merely supposition. This is men trying to explain something, and it may be correct, but it's probably not. Anything that is this complicated is not true on a spiritual level. It's just not. That is me speculating. That is me self-inserting into things. That is me, through the revelation that I have, that God has said that everything should be really simple. If it is overly complicated, it is dividing you from God. It is dividing you from the understanding that should be part of your intrinsic nature. When you see simple numbers, they can mean something. When you see this complicated stuff and you have to go through and do math in order to make it work, that's not probably a message. Right? This doesn't prove anything to me. Back to the text. Now, the secret reading of the first verse of Genesis being, in Rosh, or head, developed gods, the heavens, and the earth. It is easy to comprehend the esoteric meaning of the raven, once that the like meanings of the flood, or Noah's deluge, is ascertained. If you would like to see more about this, my I Am video, I got this on the wrong thing for some reason. Sorry, you'll be able to go back and read the text. It's exactly what I've read. So if you would like more information about what is actually being said in Genesis, the I Am video is a much better reference than anything you're going to get from the Secret Doctrine. All right, Whatever the many other meanings of this emblematical allegory may be, its chief meaning is that of a new cycle and a new round, or fourth round. You have explained how this is not the fourth round already in this chapter, but okay. Footnote. Bryant is right in saying, Druid Bardisian says of Noah that when he came out of the ark, the birth of a new cycle, after a stay therein of a year and a day, that 364 plus 1, 365 days, he was congratulated by Neptune upon his birth from the waters of the flood, who wished him a happy new year. Show me that in Genesis. Show me that in Genesis, that Neptune said Happy New Year's to Noah. Show me that shit. The year, or cycle, esoterically, was the new race of men born from women after the separation of the sexes, which is the secondary meaning of the allegory, its primary meaning being the beginning of the fourth round or the new creation. I got some news for you. The separation of the sexes was in Eden, right? Not in the time of Noah. Now, the flood story from Noah is stolen, right? It is taken part and parcel almost in its entirety from the Sumerians. And so that part, we're just going to gloss over, right? Say it is actually Noah. He wrote down that him, his wife, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives went into the ark. The flood came for 40 days. It did not take 320 days for the waters to recede. So there was no 364 plus 1 days upon the ark. That wasn't a thing. But the race of men born from women after the separation of the sexes, well, that was not the flood. The flood was not the separation of the sexes. You can assert yourself into that, right? You can insert yourself into that and say, well, what was really meant by this is this thing that I am speculating upon, but that is not what it said, not at all. It literally said that Noah and his wife, 2 separate sexes, got onto the ark with their children and their wives, again, 2 separate sexes, and then they began a new round. We'll even give them the round, right? Because to me, this was the 6,000 year ago disaster as opposed to the 12,000 year ago disaster. And so you are reading something into here that is not correct, right? Bryant is not right in saying that is not true. That is not what is represented by that account. Now, you can say that the account is not true. You can say that it is stolen, but you cannot just create a narrative inside of a story to fit something that you want. You don't get to do that. All right, back to the text. The raven, or the Eth Holbrev, yields the same numerical value as the head, and returned not to the ark, while the dove returned, carrying the olive branch, when Noah, the new man of the new race, whose prototype is Vayavasvata Manu, prepared to leave the ark. The womb, or arka, of terrestrial nature, is the symbol of purely spiritual, sexless, and androgyne man of the first 3 races who vanished from earth forever. Oh boy. Okay, so once again, no. Right? The dove returned, yeah, okay. But Noah, the new man of the new race, no. He was a continuation of the old race. Prepared to leave the ark, the womb. All right, I will grant you the womb, or the ark, can be taken as a womb, right? You go inside of it, you're preserved, and you're given new life on the other side of it. Fine. Womb. Of terrestrial nature is the symbol of the purely spiritual, sexless, and androgyne man? No, not at all. Noah had a wife, and they had 3 kids when they went in that was not androgynous or sexless. period. Right? There was literally sex that happened to create 3 children. These 3 children brought their 3 wives who they were having sex with. That is not androgynous. That is not sexless, and it is not purely spiritual. Now, if you take the story as purely allegorical with no historical value whatsoever, you can insert that interpretation into it, but you cannot do it just reading it. If you want an actual reading of what's actually going on, I have it. It's in Genesis. Numerically. And again, the numerically does nothing for me, right? That raven is the same numerical value as head is purely coincidental. There is nothing in that that intimates any greater spiritual knowledge. Not unless you insert it. Numerically, Jehovah, Adam, and Noah are one in the Kabbalah. At best, then, it is deity descending onto Ararat, later on Sinai, to incarnate in man his image through the natural process. Henceforth, the mother's wombs, whose symbols are the ark, the mount, Sinai, etc. in Genesis. And that's going to be a no as well. You're not going to convince me that a mountain is a symbol of a womb. You're not going to do that. You can give me the mountain as a symbol of a phallus. I will accept that. It is shaped roughly like a penis. Fine. It is not shaped in any way, shape, or form like a womb. It is not encapsulating. It does not hold you in its interior, nurturing you like the ark does. I will grant you the ark as a womb, even though I don't really believe it. I will not grant you Mount Sinai. Not going to happen. The Jewish allegory is at once astronomical and purely physiological rather than anthropomorphic. And again, this is not a Jewish allegory. It is stolen from the Sumerians. And here lies the abyss between the two systems, Aryan and Semitic, though built on the same foundation. As shown by an expounder of the Kabbalah, the basic idea underlying the philosophy of the Jews was that God contained all things within himself and that man was his image, man, including woman, as androgynes, and that geometry and numbers and measures applicable to astronomy are contained in the terms man and woman, and the apparent incongruity of such a mode was eliminated by showing the connection of man and woman with a particular system of numbers and measures and geometry by the parturient time periods, which furnished the connecting link between the terms and the facts shown and perfected the mode used. It is argued that, the primal cause being absolutely incognizable, the symbol of its first comprehensible manifestation was the conception of a circle with its diameter line, so as at once to carry the idea of geometry, phallicism, and astronomy, and this was, finally, applied to the signification of simply human generative organs. Footnote 2. Unpublished manuscript, but see source of measures. Hence, the whole cycle of events from Adam and the patriarchs down to Noah is made to apply to phallic and astronomical uses, the one regulating the other, as the lunar periods, for instance. Hence, too, their genesis begins after their coming out of the ark and the close of the flood at the fourth race. That's not where Genesis begins. With the Aryan people, it is different. Eastern esotericism has never degraded the one infinite deity, the container of all things, to such uses, and this is shown in the absence of Brahma from the Rig Veda and the modest positions occupied therein by Rudra and Vishnu, who became the powerful and great gods, the infinites of the exoteric creeds, ages later. But even they, creators as the three may be, are not the direct creators and forefathers of men. The latter are shown occupying a still lower scale and are called Prajapatis, the Pitris, or lunar ancestors, etc., etc., never the one infinite God. Esoteric philosophy shows only physical man as created in the image of the deity, but the latter is but the minor gods. It is the higher self, the real ego, who alone is divine and God. I do not believe necessarily that God has to have the same shape that we do. I don't have to have a God that has fingers and toes. Some people do, right? The anthropogenesis is a real thing. That's going to bring us to the end of the Theogony and the creative gods. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult series of topics. I understand I have some unconventional beliefs and a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but it is not something I apologize for. Symbology is important. Mathematics are important, but mathematics are not necessarily spiritual. Gematria, for me, has a lot of problems, not the least of which is the spelling of things. That can change according to who's doing the spelling at what particular time. The fact that they leave their vowels out and don't have things attached to that. There's a bunch of reasons why gematria is probably not divinely revelatory. That doesn't mean that it can't be. God can use whatever he wants. But you should not be spending your time trying to decipher what these letters all mean and add them up so that you can come to some understanding of your life. It is much, much simpler than that. There is a God. He wants you to live your best life, but you have the freedom to not. You have the freedom to choose to do things that are detrimental to yourself. You are in control of that, but you're not a God. This overarching need to personify God is not necessarily something that we should be doing. It's understandable. There is a reason why we do it, but that doesn't mean that it is true. It is something that we are speculating upon. Many of the things in this were just a recounting of things, and I don't like to try to correct too much the just recounting of what people did believe. When it gets into these logical fallacies, I have no choice, right? Raven and head mean they add up to the same number, but that doesn't mean anything. You can assume a meaning from that, but that doesn't mean that that assumption is correct. There are a lot of reasons not to listen to anyone who practices the Kabbalah, for a variety of reasons, many of which are outlined in the Bible study. Hopefully, I have been clear as to why I say the things that I do, and if not, drop it in the comments and we'll talk about it. Which is going to bring us to the wrap-up. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, share, and a sub. Throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that I say. Put it in the comments, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see discussed in the manner that we are doing here, drop that in the comments as well. If you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. It will be greatly appreciated. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.